Call to order regular meeting of the Board of Education at 7:18 p.m. Please call roll.
Ms. Pearson?
Present.
Ms. Mohammed?
Here.
Mr. Rollins? Mrs. McCulloch?
Here.
Mr. Siegel?
Here.
Mr. Connor?
Here.
Ms. Stanford?
Here.
With 6 present, 1 absent, we have a quorum.
Thank you. And before we proceed to the pledge, I just need to apologize to everyone for keeping you waiting. We were busy in closed session. We've all been here since 5, and I know that we're late, and I'm sorry for that. Let's go ahead and take a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to remind everybody that the mission of the Rockford Public Schools is to collaboratively engage all students in a first-class education for a changing world. I'd also like to thank Connor Childers. He works behind the scenes to produce the board's broadcast via both YouTube, live stream, and Comcast 20. We are now at the petitions and communications portion of our meeting, where we invite the public to make comments. The board will not respond to the comments at this time. If it is appropriate, you'll be contacted in a timely manner by staff. Each speaker will be allowed no more than 2 minutes to address the board. It is not appropriate to address individual board members or individual administrators or discuss matters that would otherwise be confidential. In such open meetings, 2 names will be called at one time: the one whose turn it is to speak and the person who will speak next. If you look to your left, you will see 2 digital clocks. One shows the total time allotted to public comment, and one shows the total time for each speaker. We thank you for your interest and your cooperation with our guidelines. And the first person up will probably have to turn the mic on for us. Our first speaker this evening is Teresa Phillips, followed by Terry Giano.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to address the Board of Education. My name is Teresa Phillips. My program, YAVL, was on track to get board approval tonight under the Live, Learn, and Grow grant until I got a series of contradictory communications from the legal department as well as the organization called Wabongo that was called to speak in behalf of my program. I have a letter dated July 6 of 2022 from Maureen Kirschman indicating that YAVL, the Youth Against Violence organization, was all set for board approval tonight for a contract under the Live, Learn, and Play grant. My request is simply that the YAVL program is allowed to stay on track to work with the district to provide this award-winning experience for RPS 205 students. YAVL has complied with everything that was asked of us. Even before I began, they all knew that I was an employee. I was bus driver for the district, and before I even started, I, along with my union president, sat down with the department HR to find out if this was okay for me to do so. And after speaking to her higher-ups, she came back and she gave me the green light to continue on with the process. I understand it is the legal department's job to reduce the risk for the district. However, it nor any other department should be allowed to dictate policy for the board and undermine a program that will benefit RPS students, especially those most impacted under the grant. Like I said, I wasn't in compliance. I did everything asked of me, only to end up given the ultimatum to resign from my job if I want the funding, which I was in agreement to do, and then it went from that to now my job. So if I walk out of here, I'm left with nothing, my job nor the grant. So I just ask that you please consider allowing us to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Terry Gano, followed by Nina Giangeli.
My name is Terry Gano. I'm a member of Eliminate Racism 815. I'd like to begin with a high five to the district for their recent efforts to implement plans, programs, and initiatives such as Handle with Care, the Roosevelt Opportunity Program, the restructuring of the District Code of Conduct, Aspiring Teachers Program, the Principal Residency Program, and the Educational Pathways Program within the districts to create an educational environment that is fair, equitable, and allows for all students within District 205 the opportunity to achieve their dreams and goals. Having said that, there is still more work to be done, especially for our students of color. The graduation rate for black students is 49%. The dropout rate for black students is 10%, highest in the district. Black students have a chronic absentee rate of 27%, highest in the district. All students with IEPs, black students make up 30% of those students. When it comes to discipline, black students make up 51% of all in-school suspensions, 55% of all out-of-school suspensions, and 80% of all expulsions. All this information paints a scenario which is unacceptable for the community of Rockford and everyone involved with District 205. The obvious solution is a scenario to make a much greater attraction of administrators and teachers of color to Rockford. Currently, there are 39 principals in the district, which 35 are white, 4 are black, and 52 assistant principals, of which 50 are white and only 2 are black. RPS has a total of 1,663 teachers, 86% are white, 4% are black, 4% are Hispanic. These figures have remained virtually unchanged for the last 10 years.
Thank you, Mr. Gano. Nina, followed by Michael Thomas.
Good evening. My name is Nina Gianangeli. I am a teacher in a neighboring district and a Rockford native. I couldn't call my summer travel plans vacation, along with members from local churches and community centers, including Zion Lutheran and Patriots Gateway just down the street. I hopped on a coach bus to visit significant sites of the civil rights movement in Alabama. One of the most impactful aspects of our travel was the 6th through 12th graders that came with us. They had access to scholarships to fund their trip, and they collaboratively developed discussion questions for the adults that really got us thinking. Tonight, I'd like to encourage the Rockford Public School District to either partner with these communities or offer their own travel experience for youth to learn more about the civil rights movement. This experience could benefit the youth and adults that go with them in the following ways. Learning about this period from a textbook has not done enough to help American citizens genuinely reconcile with their history over the years. In Germany, schools ensure that students and the country face the darker parts of their history, like the Holocaust. What I discovered on this trip is not only that students can handle these topics, but they bring fresh ideas to the table about how citizens can better recover from a traumatic past and discover peace. The National Museum for Justice and Peace in Montgomery, Alabama was a perfect setting for that, to begin that journey. One of the central themes that we talked about was the right to vote and the sacrifice that people have made to ensure that right, and students were walking away talking about how they weren't going to take that right for granted, which I don't usually hear from adolescents. And finally, you know, history class is one thing, but it's another thing to stand where some of these heroes stood and fought and worked I will never forget it, and it's something that I would love for the youth to experience in Rockford as well. So I hope that going forward, the district will consider this opportunity for our young people. Thank you.
Thank you. And Pastor Thomas?
Before you start the 2 minutes, does that mean as the pastor I get 23 minutes? No. Well, as pastor at Zion Lutheran Church, you can look out the window. I'm right across the street. I've been here at 11 years, the church only since 1883. Zion has been serving and leading in the Midtown neighborhoods, creating Zion Development for housing, Patriots Gateway Center for recreation, and Zion Outreach doing work in Black Hawk Buddy House for gardens. Zion, over the last 40 years, has committed over $150 million in facility programs and activities in these partnerships. And this past year, we led the trip. This was our second civil rights trip to Alabama, and we had 10 teenagers and 35 adults experiencing an incredible time in Alabama. Such education is important for all people in our community, youth and adults, to remember and reconcile our silence and complicity for those dealing with white supremacy. Therefore, I ask you to prayerfully support Patriots Gateway Center's goal to send 30 Park Player teenagers next summer on our civil rights trip that Patriots will coordinate. And then also help us, and in partnership with your school district and our community, to prayerfully consider an educational program on civil rights that helps and equips children and adults to become and continue to be rooted in a nonviolent love change movement. And then finally, in regards to Patriots, I encourage you to be aware and change the busing policy. The state does require the school district to bus children for 1.5 miles or more. Doesn't mean you don't have to bus children under 1.5 miles. In our case, to Patriots, crossing Highway 251 or Charles Street is very difficult, as well as Auburn, Harrison, and other streets. Please consider that to benefit our after-school programs at all of our community centers. And then finally, thanks for letting us use the parking lot for church, for letting us use the parking lot to the north for the market, and for our Cars and Coffee parking lot that Katie's Cup uses as a part of our monthly car show for Saturdays of the month. Blessings.
Thank you. Should be moving on to board member comments, I think, right? Do any board members have comments? Ms. Pearson?
Yes, I have multiple acknowledgments, but I am going to be very brief since we started late, and I'll make other acknowledgments next time. But I definitely wanted to acknowledge Pastor Martin of Providence Baptist Church. I've had an opportunity some time ago to have a conversation with him, and he's very passionate about the work in our community, and it was good to see that he was a part of the funding with Esther's dollars. So I definitely wanted to acknowledge Pastor Martin and his vision and his efforts in our community, and it's good to see the faith-based present and having a voice. I definitely appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Siegel.
Thank you. As always, I appreciate those who are willing to take their time and effort to come out and speak in support of helping our kids get the best educational experience they possibly can, and to encourage us to do the best job that we can in order to help that happen. One of the things that I have been talking about pretty regularly in my comments is the need to help our students get to school. The absenteeism rate is a gigantic concern. I appreciate the high five on some of the things that we have done in the recent past to address some of the issues that have been brought up. But one of the things that the school district has been doing for years and years and years is making a huge investment in resources and in time and in effort to get students to school. The last couple of years, everybody knows, has been an extreme challenge. all across the state, whether from the most rural districts to the most urban, there has been a tremendous loss of opportunity simply because attendance has been so bad. There needs to be some great advocacy done in getting our kids to school. Perhaps the busing suggestion of providing more transportation to students who live within that 1.5-mile radius is a really great one, and one that we need to pursue enthusiastically. But I also believe that there is a particular barrier that has nothing to do with wheels, that has been preventing students from getting to school and getting the exposure to the opportunities to learn. And these are the students that also are having some of the greatest challenges in terms of discipline, in terms of achievement, being able to move on successfully. We have the ability, and I believe a deep desire, to teach our students how to read, how to think for themselves, how to achieve. But this is a barrier that I get to see at just about every meeting, the barrier of kids not getting to school. So I'm eager for encouragement and suggestions on how we can solve this problem. I'm eager for partnership in communicating to the community the tremendous importance of getting the kids to school. Seeing instances of kids missing 100 days of school, 50 days, even 30 days. When you think about that, the kids are missing 20 days. Doesn't seem terrible, but that's 10% of the school year, more than 10%. That's a loss of a grade. Over the course of their career, that's a loss of a whole year, more than a whole year. So seeing it in those sort of terms, I hope that people will see the urgency of getting kids to school. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Siegel. Seeing no other lights, I'll give the floor to Dr. Jarrett, who will give us the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Board President McCulloch. To start with, I was able to do some rapid introductions, but I want to formally introduce Dr. Reed, our new Chief of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. He is an outstanding educator and has been spending a great deal of time connecting and listening and getting to know our community internally and within the district, as well as starting his work externally. So glad to have you, Dr. Reed, and excited to see the important work that you will be undertaking. Wonderful to have you on board. So welcome, and I'm down to one board member I have to introduce you to, but I know we'll spend a lot of time doing that moving forward. So welcome to the district. Additionally, speaking of Dr. Reed, his recruiting team just received some really good news. I was able to forward this to the board today, but due to the hard work of our lobbying team, we were able to get included in Senator Durbin's earmarks, a $200,000 earmark to help us invest in our Rockford University pathway. So those resources will be put to good use to expand. That is an annual commitment to the district of about $450,000 in order to make the investment in providing the master's program, which allows Rockford University to pass on tuition discounts and other educational services. Within that $200,000, we will certainly be exploring new ways to expand, grow, and improve our Grow Your Own programming, and I know Dr. Reed and his team will put that to great use. Finally, I just want to highlight that in last week's update, I sent a draft of what we refer to as my superintendent targets as part of the goal setting process. Due to time constraints, I won't go into great detail here, but I would just ask that over the course of the week that you review them. I have paper copies with me here if anyone would like one, if you didn't get a chance to get that digitally. But there are two big areas that I'm proposing that we focus the work of the superintendent and the district on to support our system-wide framework and our ultimate equity vision to ensure that zip code is not a predictor of student outcomes. One is a heavy emphasis on aligning the job descriptions as well as the evaluation process to ensure the standards of practice are effectively being implemented by faculty and staff in our buildings. From a big picture perspective, it means we are going to make sure that everyone in the district knows their role in improving student outcomes. Right now, we've really emphasized the board level involvement in the system-wide framework, as well as the district office and principals. But that work is only going to be successful if we find if we're really successful in connecting that to teachers, to social workers, to school psychologists. So all of the different groups that are represented in a school, and that's well over a $200 million staffing investment. We've got to find ways to make sure those are connected. So you can review the details of how I propose to do that, but ultimately the measurement would come out in improved standard of practice scores. The second area of focus really comes down to using our existing resources like our panorama data and the many possible multi-tiered system of support systems that are in place, and starting on a weekly basis to make sure we are monitoring and carefully supporting schools in their development of student support systems. In my experience, we have a lot of room for improvement in making sure we are proactive in making sure students receive all of the interventions that they need. And this proposal attempts to provide clarity to our schools team, our principals, and all of our staff in terms of the roadmap for making sure our students are proactively placed in interventions and monitoring that on a weekly basis. Ultimately, the measurement of success there would be to see an improved performance on the multi-tiered system of support standard of practice. So you can read those details, give me feedback. I'd be happy to take phone calls or meetings as needed, but with principals getting ready to welcome their staffs back very quickly, I do want to kind of land this as quickly as possible, so I'm hoping to get feedback by the end of the week from the board. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jarrett. And I will say that having been sent out previously, I think this, we have the rest of this week, and if Dr. Jarrett doesn't hear from us, then we will be standing where we're at with those goals. And I think, do you have hard copies as well? Look, you can take them and put them next to you on your bedside table and review. But in fairness to him, instead of drawing it out any farther, if you have any questions or concerns, you can speak with him or send them to myself. Well, I have one sitting on the counter, but I'll take another. Thank you. All right, we're now on to items that proceeded through the Performance and Monitoring Committee. Those items are Board Policy 5.185, General Personnel, Family and Medical Leave. Board Policy 5.210, Professional Personnel, Resignations. Board Policy 5.220, Professional Personnel, Substitute Teachers. Board Policy 5.285, Educational Support Personnel, Drug and Alcohol Testing for School Bus and Commercial Vehicle Drivers. Board Policy 5.290, Educational Support Personnel, Employment Termination and Suspension. Board Policy 5.30, Educational Support Personnel, Schedule Employment Year. Board Policy 6.210, Instruction and Instructional Materials. And Board Policy 6.235, Instruction, Access to Electronic Networks and Resources. Is there a consensus to approve the policies with one motion and one vote?
So moved. So moved.
Second.
There you go.
Thank you. We still have we'll take them all in one vote, but we still have an opportunity for discussion. Are there any of them, and that can be individually? Okay, seeing no lights, I'll have the administrator call the roll on board policies 5.185, 5.210, 5.220, 5.285, 5.290, 5.300, 6.210, and 6.235.
Ms. Pearson?
Yes.
Ms. Mohammed?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
Thank you. Ms. Stanford, do you have any additional items to bring to the board from your committee? No? Okay, thank you. So we'll go on to Planning and Development Committee. We have the resolution authorizing and directing the preparation of the tentative 2023-2024 budget. Is there a motion and a second to approve that item?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on that resolution, I'm sorry. Ms. Pearson.
Just for clarity, we will actually vote in September regarding the budget.
That'll be for the FY23 budget. This is for us to get started on the budget that starts a whole nother year from now.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
So, would the coordinator call the roll?
Ms. Mohammed?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Ms. Pearson?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
Thank you. Mr. Rollins is not here, so I'll ask Mr. Phillips, the administrative liaison, if there's any additional follow-up items.
There are none.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure, I know that from this committee and from your report last time on the facilities, we, as a board, sent back, kind of a message about what we thought was important, which seemed to be getting a timeline for putting together a facilities master plan. And in the meantime, there was some CCPRT money. I think the board was fairly clear in not wanting to go forward until we saw a full plan with regard to athletics and some of the other facility pieces. I thought there was, and I would like for anybody to correct me if I'm wrong, that there was consensus that we were concerned about security. So if we have additional money for that, that isn't something we would want to wait 2 years on for those kind of fixes. The one area that was unclear to me was the deferred maintenance, because I heard both that should be part of the facilities plan. We shouldn't be in a rush to spend all the money, but I also heard we need to get our deferred maintenance done. So if anybody would be willing to weigh in on that, I think administration would appreciate just hearing, and especially since Dr. Jarrett wasn't here at the last meeting. So is there anybody who has any thoughts on that? And the thought I'm asking you about is our deferred maintenance, things that we have put off and not done. Do we want to direct administration to go ahead and start spending the money to do that, or do we want to put those as part of the full plan? And I will tell you that Mr. Rollins not being here, but still being the committee chair, was very clear in that he would really like them rolled into the full plan. So, and Mr. Phillips, yeah.
Yeah, Ms. McCulloch, we actually came out of last week's committee of the whole with 2 action items. Number 1 was to put a list together of the projects that we would bring forward for consideration for funding with the additional $15 million of CPPRT funds. Those projects primarily were decennial life safety projects that were amendments that were approved by the board, security vestibules, and lastly, some facilities condition assessment projects that were primarily paving projects. So we will be, Mr. Brown and I are working on that list, and we will be providing that to the board as a follow-up next Friday. The other action item that we were requested to provide was our facilities condition kind of assessment report. And basically what I'll be providing to the board at the end of September is by school the replacement cost, the facilities condition index cost, which is cost from years 0, basically 5 years worth of cost, our requirement index, which is from years 6 to year 20, and then a total. And so that report will come by school and will be provided to the board at the end of September.
Will there be any sort of priorities, or is it just a full, just flat out report?
Through the month of, those two were committed to at the previous board meeting. When I had a chance to speak to Dr. Brown and Mr. Phillips, we also felt it was important to come back to the board with some ideas about what a process would look like to solicit ideas from the actual school communities. We think that the facilities conditions assessment does a great job by school of laying out what schools need. What that may be light on are some of the academic and co-curricular campus needs. So we will also bring forward to the board ideas in partnership with the communications team, what a listening session proposal would look like by school, so we can bring more information there, and ultimately partner with the board to determine what information gathering should look like. So we would just bring ideas for process so the board could talk about that, because we think one of the missing elements, in addition to the reporting by school, is before we engage in a multi-year facilities process, one of the things I think we did well last time is we had multiple opportunities for our community and for our school communities to weigh in. So we want to build some ideas of what that could look like to the board. That could range from bringing in an outside expert to doing it internally. That can range in time frame and cost. So we will bring forth some options for the board of what that would look like. In the short term, Mr. Phillips and Dr. Brown are going to bring forward what we think could be immediately done based on the priorities the board laid out for this fiscal year, but we would limit the scope dramatically compared to what was presented, as Mr. Phillips highlighted. And then finally, at the end of September, we would provide that school by school conditions assessment. So really there'd be a third element as well. We'd come forth with some options for the board about what listening would look like to develop a more fulsome facilities rollout.
For clarification, that listening process would happen before you have a committee, and
we would
use what you got from the listening process to
before we would do any listening process, Mrs. McCulloch, we would come to the board with ideas of what a listening process could look like. Then the board would send us on our merry way, depending on what is decided, whether you send us out to bring in an outside group like we did the last time we did this, or whether you direct us to work internally. We'll give you options and kind of proposed cost structures and timelines.
Okay.
So we won't do any listening.
How does that fall into the plan to coming up with a facilities plan, which took us 2 years last time?
So that's exactly right. We need to get a sense of what the board expects out of a plan. What we didn't have last time was actual facilities condition assessment data. Okay. What we still lack is a refreshed stakeholder engagement process to find out what people in the respective school communities and in our district community would like to see occur in terms of investment. We don't have that laid out yet, and we want to give the board options of what that kind of community listening process would look like. Typically that involves visioning of what the school district would look like in the future, or it could be very limited in focus to a very heavy deferred maintenance focus, which is very clearly outlined in our conditions assessment. So we want the board to set the direction. We will give you options.
Thank you. Any other questions about that topic? Okay, thank you both. Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent portion of our meeting, which includes the items previewed by the board committee chairs during the committee of the whole meeting. The consent agenda items from Performance and Monitoring Committee are payroll, accounts payable, purchase orders from fiscal year 22, purchase orders from fiscal year 23, air travel, monthly cash and investment report from June 2022, the addendum to the consolidated contracts, the EPA 2022 Clean School Bus Rebate Program, the Frontline Technologies, Houghton Mifflin Harcourt Professional Learning, the E911 software, Go Guardian Beacon Core, Youth Service Network Amendment, also the consent items from Planning and Development Committee, the LETRS Professional Learning, Antoine Harris Group, Art Besser, the Life Church Art Besser, the Providence Community Development Corps Art Besser, and the Rockford Dance Company Art Besser. Consent agenda items for our governance committee include the meeting minutes from 7/19/22, contract purchase orders from fiscal year 2022, contract purchase orders from fiscal year 2023, the Educational Office Personnel Association tentative agreement, the Rockford Area Economic Development Council, the Midwest Family of Northern Illinois 9/11 Hero Club fee waiver, the public sale of the former Style property, the Illinois Workers' Compensation Settlement Agreement, and the Freedom of Information log. I think, did I get through all of them? Yep. Is there a motion and a second to approve those consent items?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any items board members would like to have pulled for further conversation? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the roll on the approval of the consented items that I've just listed.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Ms. Pearson?
Yes.
Ms. Mohammed?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
Thank you. We're now on to the closed session consent agenda, which includes the notice to remedy for Jeffrey Myers, the salary adjustment for a 12-month Dean of Elementary Math assigned to the Administration Building, the appointment of Talvi Bandel as a 10-month middle school assistant principal assigned to West, the appointment of Aaron Zolaki as the 10-month middle school assistant principal assigned to Eisenhower, the appointment of Jason Ware as a 10-month elementary assistant principal assigned to Cherry Valley, the appointment of Andrew Butler as a 10-month middle school assistant principal assigned to Lincoln, the appointment of Jody Freeman as a 10-month elementary school principal assigned to Johnson, the appointment of Allison Hunter Rosine as a 10-month early childhood dean assigned to Nashhold, the appointment of Christy D. Grace as a 10-month assistant principal assigned to Welsh, the HR organizational report, and addendum. Is there a motion and a second to approve the closed session consent items?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Are there any closed session consent items that board members would like to have pulled for separate consideration? No? Okay, seeing no lights, I'm going to ask Ms. Fromm to call the roll on the approval of the closed session consent items as listed.
Oh, excuse me. Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Ms. Pearson?
Yes.
Ms. Mohammed?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
Thank you. I'll ask board members if there is any other business, new business, agenda recommendations, or any board member action steps. Seeing no lights, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Exits list summaries would go to Ms. Goldsmith, if you would, please. Thank you.
Thanks again for those bagels.
Oh, it's fun to have somebody to cook for.
Well, we both.